Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, this is Orphan Last, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm going to go ahead and make a digital version of this image that's fan art for Babylon 5. I know that I already have a fan art piece that I started on my channel that's Babylon 5 related, and at some point in time I plan on getting around to getting that image finished and everything like that, but in its own due time. Now, if you guys have gone onto my community tab on my channel, I have this recent post that I put up here, and it reads as follows. When thinking about next week's content, which happens to be this video that you're watching right now, I've been thinking of a number of things. First, my big goal of 2020 is to make an official Orphan Last website, and I've been hard at work actually making a prototype of what each page would look like. I want something that doesn't look slapped together with some default template. And I've looked over the images that I've been making over the years, and how is it that after 3 years, the biggest collection of artwork that I actually have are pictures of my mascot? Sure, I have some Patreon drawing requests to post on my portfolio, and I can use some images of my mascot, but I have an art-centered channel, and somehow I don't have much artwork to show for it that actually shows the diversity of different sorts of styles that I can work in. I've been looking it over on my channel, and this is the answer that I'm finding.
Number 1.
It's because quite a bit of the work that I've been doing is educational, an image that's not so much aimed at being a work of art, but aimed at being educational.
Number 2.
Some of it has been me learning new software like Blender.
Number 3.
Me working on commission pieces, which I don't think I have the rights to use to promote myself.
Number 4.
Quite a bit of it is animation, and though that's something I can use for a show reel, and I love animation and everything like that, I just don't feel that I'm where I'd want to be in order to get paid to do animation. So it's not really something that I'd want to put into a portfolio as of right now. Those are all the things that I would not want to abandon for the content that I provide for you guys. But I didn't know that it was affecting my personal output of artwork that I could actually use quite that much. It's mind-boggling. I feel I need to work on my portfolio quite a bit, so I'll be trying to think of ways to incorporate work that I'm doing for my portfolio as tutorials, but that might be a little advanced for the newbies out there. So unfortunately, some of my content for 2020 will be for the more advanced artists. Temporarily, okay? When I can find time, I'll be working on the perspective training wheels, and if I can find any way to do that, I will. Patreon artwork will still be output every month, and so far my Blender content has been coming out once every month. For the last few months, it's been a Patreon image, a drawing tutorial with an image I can't ever use, a Blender video, and then a miscellaneous video. Usually another image I can't use. Seriously, just look over the videos coming out, you'll see what I'm talking about. Something about the format that I've been using all through these last few years makes it so that I don't actually have much personal artwork to show for all of this hard work. It hasn't been in vain or anything like that. I've been building an audience, one that I feel has been supportive and friendly. It's very important to me to learn Blender and to share my findings, but it has to take a back seat for a little while. Maybe a Blender video every 2 months or so, just until I can have enough impressive images to actually market myself. It's a goal to be a fully self-employed artistic freelancer by the end of 2020. This year, to some degree, I have to make content for myself in order to secure some sort of future. So far, I've given quite a bit, and giving is good. I plan on giving more, but there comes a point to where you kind of feel like you've given the shirt off your back, and then you're wondering why you're not wearing a shirt. So maybe not as much as I would like to. Hope you guys understand. And so that's the post that I put up on the community tab of my channel. As far as giving goes, I guess this is the best image to kind of illustrate that I'm not done just giving out either artistic advice or giving something at least to the community, to the world, and all of that. This is a fan art piece. I can't make any money off of this image. So I've gone ahead and actually posted this image in a few places around the internet already. Instagram, but primarily if you want to get get the high-resolution version of this image, it's on my Patreon. A link is supplied in the video description below, and it's available for anyone to download, full resolution, everything. And so, with that all having been said, I want to kind of talk about just the image that I'm working on right now. Now, when I'm working with my sketchbook, sometimes the page is just too small to be putting in a whole bunch of really fine renderings and such like that. And so here I am working with a really high definition digital file, and it's kind of getting me to think, well, you know, I might as well just start boosting up the amount of detail inside of the image. And so this isn't just me inking an image, this is me trying to genuinely get the best image that I possibly can out of what I had already established. So there's a degree of sketching and such, and getting the perspective work to kind of align with the already established image. Now, all of the perspective work was kind of eyeballed, just kind of free-handed, and there was a perspective grid, but there was no really formal perspective grid. And so just to keep things from going too far away from the initial sketch that I actually drew out inside of my sketchbook, I decided to continue having an informal perspective grid. You can actually see me on occasion kind of sketch out just a little bit of a grid, basically having a vanishing point within the vicinity of where the vanishing point was in the initial sketch. And I think this worked out pretty well. You can kind of see me occasionally revisiting things that I've already drawn here and there and thickening out the lines. I keep having a few people asking me to do some sort of tutorial on line work, and that's pretty difficult to try to cue you guys in on while I'm actually drawing an image. So what I'm thinking about doing in the future is actually just kind of looking over a bunch of images that I've drawn in the past and kind of demonstrating the thought process that's used while doing the line work and all of that. What determines the line thickness and such like that. But really, ultimately, sometimes people are asking me for line work tutorials and I look at their artwork, and it's not that they need to work on their line work. I mean, they do, but a lot of the time it's an issue that's much bigger than the line work. They're not thinking about three-dimensional space, they're just thinking about where the lines go. And as I've already stated inside of the Teach Me to Draw series, it's not about where the lines go. The lines are basically you sculpting a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface. And so if you're not thinking as if the image that you're drawing is three-dimensional to begin with, then of course your image is going to come out looking wrong, most especially if your line thickness happens to be incorrect. But even if your line thicknesses were just right, there would still be problems with your image. At least with a lot of people that are asking me for a line work tutorial, what determines what has the thicker lines and such. Right here you can actually see me actually kind of tinkering around with the line thicknesses, and the reason why I revisit things that I've already drawn and thicken out the lines after the fact is because really, while you're inking an image or drawing an image in general, you don't really know how thick the lines need to be until you draw something behind another object. Your line thicknesses are determined by everything else that's around it. And so if an object is in front of another object, then the object that's in front needs to have its silhouette. The largest silhouette of that object needs to be the thickest, just in general. And you know, the thickest lines could even possibly even be where there's a shadow and such like that. Just have this extra boost of communication that, hey, yeah, you know, there's not just something in front of another object, but, you know, communicating a shadow as well. Basically, you can actually see me flipping back and forth to Google Images on occasion and just kind of reviewing a bunch of reference images just to kind of get a better idea than the initial drawing. I made some decisions while inking this thing that I never thought that I was going to make. I thought I was just going to be really loyal to the initial sketch when I first sat down to kind of polish this image off, but as time wore on, it became more and more clear that I needed to refine it quite a bit more, especially since more detail can be put into a digital image with a high resolution and everything. Yeah, you know, here I'm just laying down my flats because I can see that I need to revisit some of Babylon 5 in order to get rid of some lines that I forgot about. And yeah, just once I have that accomplished, I go ahead and erase lines that I forgot about and all that. Right, okay, so here's the fun part. I've always wondered how I would go about drawing out the skin on a Minbari fighter. And I say skin because I'm fairly confident that the Minbari fighters have organic material in them. I think that if the White Star has organic material that's able to heal damage over time, then it only makes sense that the Minbari fighters would have, the skin membrane that the White Stars have and biological little structures within them. It's like an artificially created living organism. And when I looked at the reference image, it's a really old 3D model from the 1990s, and it's not that the 3D model is bad or anything. It's just that the way of doing textures is kind of improved over time. And if that series were to have been aired within modern history, I think that the rendering of these sorts of craft would be a little bit different. And so I wound up kind of making it look as though the weird skin on a Minbari ship had veins and such kind of articulated throughout its whole structure. And I pretty much did the exact same thing with the White Star, just kind of making all of these little veins and such. And this took quite a while, and I was actually kind of contemplating, I could potentially just make a brush that looks like a bunch of veins and such, and then just go ahead and just warp it and such. But I need I'm already kind of familiar with how to make a brush inside of Affinity Photo, but I would want to get a little bit more practice in order to make it worth anyone's while to take a look at, hey, look, I made a brush for this. Some of this texture work that I wound up doing, I actually kind of regret a little bit, primarily because later on down the road, I wound up making these really stupid mistakes, and these stupid mistakes made it so that, especially with the Star Fury and the Minbari fighter, I had to actually just completely redo. And some of that's because, just something as simple as control clicking and pressing delete. And, I could press control Z a bunch of times, but then again, if I press control Z a bunch of times, I'm just going to wind up getting rid of a lot of work that takes up even more real estate on the canvas. And so in the end, I kind of opted to kind of redo the texturing on the Minbari fighter as well as on the Star Fury. It's at this point right here that I can actually see, that Star Fury, the textures are just a little too wonky at this point. I made too many mistakes with it, so I decided to start from scratch, and I used a completely different texture brush in order to do the texturing. And to be honest, I think it looks a heck of a lot better with the second attempt than with the first attempt. After doing the texturing, normally I'd get all of my flats done, but I noticed, I keep forgetting that there's more flats needing to get completed, and so I had to kind of take a step back and get that completed. And you can see me just kind of realizing that I need to kind of start fleshing out a few more things. Let's get a light source going on here, and so I establish a light source, a bright light source in the center of it. It'll have pure white, like a super bright object will have pure white in the center of it, and then it'll gradient out as whatever color light it happens to be. And I kind of settled with a yellow orange sort of look. Most of the lighting work that I did initially was pretty much just working with the brush, no selections or anything like that, and I think it came out looking all right. It didn't I'm not really that disappointed with it, but eventually I kind of started gravitating towards using the lasso tool, having these on the go, on the fly sort of stencils going on. And I like to control click and subtract from the selection, and I'm starting to kind of think that it's actually faster just to select things and without control clicking, because it takes almost just as long to subtract from a selection as it does to just select it. And you'll notice that when I'm doing the actual lighting, I'm not concerned about coloring inside the lines, because light oftentimes creates kind of this little halo effect that exceeds outside of the lines. And so it adds to the validity of what you're looking at when it actually goes outside of the lines. One of the things that I was kind of conscientious about with Babylon 5 in the background was that it needed to actually, you needed to be able to see that it was behind everything. If it has the exact same values as everything else inside of the scene, then everything just kind of starts to blend together, and you can't tell the difference between where the Star Fury begins and where Babylon 5 ends and stuff like that. You're not able to tell the difference between the two objects. And so the goal was to make sure that my highlights were a little bit dimmer on Babylon 5, and same thing with the shadows to some degree. But, you know, the things that are closer and closer to the foreground with Babylon 5, that's when I started to use some more absolute darks, stronger values of shadows and such. But all of the highlights are a little bit more creamy, I guess. That's the word that I would use. It wound up looking kind of creamy with Babylon 5 itself. All of the footage actually shows Babylon 5 as having just one set of its solar panels, but off camera I go back and I go ahead and add the other set of solar panels on the other side of it. Here I'm just kind of starting out the process of doing my shadows, and just all of this was a lot of lasso tools and just a really fluffy zero hardness brush. And if you look at my layers panel, I wound up with probably about 5 or 6 different gradient maps just to kind of get this image finished. And yeah, you know, I'm really happy with how this image comes out. Like, especially in the last, I'd say 30 minutes of me working on this image, I wound up kind of working on the planet, and I was always kind of wondering, how am I going to make this planet look good? And I just kind of played around, and in the end it looks like a painted planet, but so it doesn't necessarily look like it's a photograph or anything like that. There was no photo textures or anything with this entire image, by the way, but I wound up using the liquify tool in a really weird way, and then I started to add the highlights, and I liked how the highlights were interacting with the already established star in the image. And so I just kind of started to kind of boost up a little bit of the highlights with just about everything except for Babylon 5 itself, to kind of show just, things are glistening in the sun, kind of almost, overexposing objects a little bit in order to get the effect that I want. Here I'm just kind of thinking really carefully, how do I want to shade this area? And it's all about selecting the right things and brushing in the right places with the right values. And, it's kind of surprising. I didn't really put too much texture and everything like that, and surprisingly with Babylon 5, other than like having to brush in a bunch of things like little veins and stuff on the Minbari ships, there wasn't really that much flat work needing to be done, which is something that I'm kind of actually grateful for. I'm really glad that I didn't have to do a whole lot in order to get it to look right. And yeah, you can kind of see me kind of reconsidering a few of the shadows, and sometimes I take advantage of the reconsideration and sometimes I don't. And here I'm thinking, okay, I need to have some red lights, because around this area inside of the TV show Babylon 5 there are some red lights. This is the docking area for Babylon 5, and so I'm just kind of tinkering around with it while making these stars. All that I did is I created a new layer and applied a whole load of noise to it, and I wound up playing around with the levels, ramping it up in both directions, and I also desaturated it, and then I just kind of inverted it so that most of it was black, and then I just pulled out a black hard brush and then just kind of brushed in some blackness into it, and it really made it look like a lot of stars in the background. Here I'm working on the planet. I went ahead and just kind of drew out this flat texture for what I want the planet to look like, and used the liquify tool, and boom, just done. And you can see me kind of making several several attempts at the planet and then kind of getting rid of it, like all the stuff that I'm doing, just trying to play around with stuff. And then after a while, it just kind of became clear to me, you know, sometimes less is more. And so I didn't really continue working on the planet much more than just a few highlights here and there and a big shadow side of the planet. And as you can see, once I started working on the lighting on the planet, that's when I started adding all of that glistening effect to just about everything in the scene, and it just really starts to come together quite a bit. Yeah, I'm really happy with this image. Here's the final result of the image, as you can see. And yeah, I hope that you guys think that this is a cool image. Once again, if you guys want to get a hold of this image, you can go ahead and get it off of my Patreon, full resolution for free. It's available to everybody, and yeah, hope you guys take advantage of that. Anyways, guys, that pretty much concludes it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you guys would like to get more notifications from me or to have more participation with my community, feel free to follow me on Twitter or go ahead and join my Discord. A link is supplied in the video description below. If you'd like to support my channel, feel free to click on the image of my mascot in the upper right corner of the screen. It leads to my Patreon. Any support would be much appreciated. And if you've enjoyed this content and would like to see more, feel free to click on anything else that's appearing on the screen right now. Thank you very much for your time.